Hello beauty! If you are watching this tutorial, that means you have likely already purchased our wax-based foundation at Lime Life by Alcone, and I have been using this now for 8 years. I absolutely love it, and there is nothing else quite like it. I'm really excited to go over all the points of difference and show you all the different tools that we have when it comes to choosing the best one for you to apply it and get the most out of this foundation. First, let me just start by saying if you have not taken this yet, I'm going to need you to go to the link that is attached to this video and take the color matching quiz. It's so simple. You will just take a quick quiz. It's going to tell you your shade number, and you can always reach out to me to confirm that it's the best color match for you. These are sold in duo palettes, they're sold individually, or they're sold in pro palettes, okay? So first things first, I have my color. I am shade number 23. I also use our foundation for contouring. I'm not going to get into that today because this is really just to show you how to apply the foundation and potentially concealer if you are somebody that needs concealer or wants to use concealer to include it. So I have nothing on my face right now except for my skincare. And the very first thing I want to state is that a wax-based foundation is going to look so natural. It's going to look skin-like. That's the beauty of this foundation and why this vendor, RCMA, you can look them up. They're the Research Council of Makeup Artists. They actually have been in business for decades and partnered and were one of the first makeup companies to be umbrellaed under Lime Life as a pro product line. And they took off so much, people loved it so much that we actually had to go at one point a few years back, we had to put them out of stock for months at a time so that they could develop a new system because they always hand poured them. And they basically needed to develop machines to be able to keep up with the amount of high demand. They've been featured in Cosmopolitan before for being like the best secret weapon out there. Okay, and they've been used in film and fashion for a long time, like I mentioned. So why? What makes it? Number one, it's free of dyes and animal byproducts and a lot of like mineral oils and things that are in foundations that are clogging pores, which is a big issue. But another neat thing about the wax base is that it does not oxidize on the skin. So the color that you see is what you get. When you swatch this color and leave it there for 5 hours, 10 hours, it's going to be the same color. If you swatch this versus any other liquid foundation you have at home, the odds are the liquid foundation that you have that starts off one color is a completely different color by the end of the day because of that oxidation. So you don't have to worry about it changing color. Another thing is that it has 50% pigment. So you have on average up to about 23% pigment in most foundations that are over the counter. This has twice the amount, so that means you need to use a fraction of the amount, okay? So you're gonna use a really minimal amount of product with this to get a really flawless result and build up the coverage, all right? So that's what makes this so special. You are going to get so many compliments on your skin, and when you do, be sure to use your referral link. If you don't know what that is, get with me so I can help you, and we will send this your way, okay? So we're gonna talk a little bit about the different options you have for application. Okay, so there's really 4 types of tools that I want to cover with you today that we'll go over, and I will show you which makes the most sense for you. Okay, another thing that you're going to want to think about is having an oil, whether it is through our oils or some other type of face oil that you have. I highly recommend it because this is such a concentrated amount. When you can actually mix a little bit of oil with it, it gives more slip, it warms up the product, and it helps it spread easier on the skin, okay? So I always use Due Date oil. Due Date is going to be better for somebody that wants something a little bit more dewy of a look, which I love. You don't have to use it everywhere on the face. You could just use it on the cheeks or wherever you like. One Drop Wonder is going to be better if you don't want dewy finish. You just want a little bit of slip, but then for it to immediately dissolve in the skin, if you will, so that you can get the slip from the product but not have to feel it sitting there throughout the day. Okay, so let's get into it. We are going to cover 4 different tools for foundation. The very first one that we're going to talk about is this Blenderful sponge. Now this is a mini size, believe it or not. It did get a little bit bigger because I put it in water, which you would want to do before applying. Okay, you would take a little bit, dip it or run it under water, squeeze it out. This will help prevent your product from being absorbed in the sponge. It'll just give it a more even application. But let's talk about why you might want to choose the Blenderful. It's going to give it a light to medium coverage. You actually only need just a little bit of product with this. I'm going to show you how to bounce it on the skin and use it, but you can wash and reuse this for up to 3 months, which is amazing. So I think if you're already somebody that's been used to using your fingers or a sponge, you're going to want to go this route. But the shape of it is so unique. It allows you to also go in with concealer to put right underneath or in the corners. So that's something else that you can do. Now, with concealer, I definitely recommend doing your foundation first, then concealer, unless you have something major that you're trying to color correct. If you have rosacea, you have a lot of redness in the skin, I'm going to suggest going in color correcting, then putting your foundation on top. Or if you have melasma, for instance, let's say, which is that dark hyperpigmentation on the skin, you may want to do your color correcting and then go over with a foundation. But everybody else, you're probably just going to want to use foundation because it gets such a good coverage, and then go in just little sparse areas to apply concealer if needed, okay? So first things first, we are going to roll this right in, and you can pick up some of the product, and you can do a little kind of like bouncing technique, or like you're pushing it and turning it at the same time, okay? Just like a little bit of a bounce here. You'll start to notice my skin becoming more even, okay? And I like to just bounce in really quick motions so it does not at all go on too heavy onto the skin. And you notice that one swipe through my foundation is really gonna cover probably about half of my face. Now I can use this little Blenderful because I have a small face shape, to be honest, but you might like the big Blenderful. It's gonna cover more quickly, okay? This is what it would look like. Then you can go in and clean, which is a totally separate video, but everybody loves having this sponge because the pores are so tight and it just puts the application on really beautifully. Okay, so the next tool that we're going to discuss is this brush number 18, which is actually designed to be a highlight and contour brush. However, because it has the synthetic hairs like all of our brushes do, you can really use them with any of the products that we have that's liquid or cream or powder, because synthetic just keeps that natural shape and it just deposits it in a way that makes it work with all of those different types of mediums. So I love this brush. This is probably my go-to tool because it really paints the product on an airbrush look, okay? I just swirl just a little bit in here, and you guys can notice I can literally paint this on, and it's going to give me a beautiful application. Now know wherever you first hit the face, that's where the most product's going to go first, right? It's going to lay it down the heaviest there. So I always start at the cheeks and work my way out with my brush so that I have less product elsewhere. This is typically where we end up needing the most coverage, so that's where I want my brush to go. But again, just one little swatch, and it starts painting the skin for me really nice, but still giving me this breathable look where I do have some of my freckles still showing, okay? So again, this application versus this application, this is gonna be a little bit lighter, more natural, but having that oil first is gonna make it really dewy, okay? The next one we have is your classic number 4 foundation brush, which I pick up the least amount, okay, because it really gives a thicker coverage when you're using a wax base. Do you guys see just how much, like you can almost see it sitting on top of the skin? And so to me, this is going to be really heavy. So I highly recommend choosing a different tool unless you are somebody that you just have a ton ton of hyperpigmentation to cover or some acne. And then you could do this kind of stippling technique where you're really patting and pressing into the skin and really blending it in. It's going to be really important when you're doing a brush like this that your skin is hydrated and always that your skin's exfoliated. If you ever notice that your makeup, you can see it looks dry, flaky, cakey, that's gonna be something to do with your skin, that you're gonna wanna go back and address the skin. Or it could be that you're doing way too much. So I just did a tiny little dab. Again, I did go over other product, but it's a much thicker coverage. So again, if you want a fuller coverage, this is gonna be for you. Now, last but not least, we do have two different types of buffer brushes, 17 and number 5. You can see that's a huge difference. So this is going to be if you have a bigger face shape and you want a really full, I prefer this with liquids, which we don't carry here at Lime Life for foundation. Using the wax base, I love this smaller buffer brush. Again, it's going to get in little areas better. So you could take just a little bit of your product, which I just dabbed here, and this is going to be great for concealer even, but if you want to use the foundation and get in those smaller areas, you can do a swirling motion. It's not going to leave any marks, which is nice, so why people love it. There's no like demarcation lines or anything, just buffs it right into the skin. So you can also use these tools for a variety of other things like contouring, highlighting, concealer, but today I wanted you to see the difference in each of them so that you could make the best decision for yourself. Okay, so next we discussed having a concealer, and I would recommend choosing, you'll obviously get a recommendation from me, and I do have a full breakdown on each of these concealers, what to use them for and why, but like I mentioned earlier, I would be picking a concealer, a tool that's going to make the most sense with how much concealer. So I love using the Blenderful, especially in this area because it just fits perfectly. I use concealer number 3 because I do have some dark circles from my allergies, which is more of a blue undertone. So that number 3 concealer is just going to completely color correct that. Okay, so it's all about knowing what you're trying to correct when it comes to using your concealer. And so that's really the main area. If I wanted to use something for my face, this number 3 is a little salmony for my face. I'm much more fair, so I would need this one as well, which is nice because we have a complexion palette that will give you a foundation and 2 concealers. So that's one of the reasons why. Some people might need 2 concealers to color correct redness, use a really light highlighter to highlight certain areas of the face, or maybe you want to go in with one of our deeper concealers to contour. It's just completely up to the look that you're trying to create. But that is really the majority of what I wanted to teach you today about application and tools. The next thing you can do from here is add a translucent powder, okay? So I love having translucent powder because it's translucent, like I just mentioned. So you can get a beautiful, long-lasting application. Of course, when you're doing the under eye concealer, you want to make sure to smooth out with your fingertips, and anywhere that you put this is just going to set it, lock it into place. It'll absorb oil and shine. So maybe you just want to go through the T-zone and leave that oil in the cheekbones. Totally up to you. You can reapply this multiple times per day if you would like in order to get that oil absorption. So some of you guys have heard of like blotting mats. I don't think you need those at all when you have translucent pressed powder because you can just touch up and go over as many times as need be and it won't change the application. It'll just absorb oil and keep everything in place, okay? There are primers and setting sprays we have as well, and that's really going to depend on the person's need, whether you need extra, if you want to cover like the little pores, like if you have bigger pores that you want covered, you're gonna want a primer, right? Because it's just gonna fill in the gaps. I actually get my primer through my SPF, which I applied today, but if you need extra help with that, and that's one of your frustrations and complaints with your makeup, we have a spray one that works beautifully. We also have a setting spray that works beautifully to lock it in even further, like up to 15 hours. That is the complete guide for foundation. I hope this was helpful to you. Remember that less is more, number one. So just a very minimal amount. You guys saw just how little. It's one swatch in for half the face. The other thing that I wanted to remind you of, use an oil, okay, just to get some of that slip on the skin. And of course, if you're noticing any flaking, be sure to ask, yourself, when was the last time I exfoliated? Do I need to do a little bit of a manual exfoliant? Because as you can see, this should look flawless on the skin. It should look like real skin, giving you a complete match without any flaking, without looking cakey at all, okay? So I'm so excited to partner with you, and please be sure to share your referral link with friends if you love this, or give a review if you love this. I'd love to hear from you.